Yeah, look, and you've got the obvious things like holding the book close to the page, getting close to the page when they're writing, closing one eye, even it may not even happen in the classroom. If they're closing one eye in the sunlight, that can be an indication that there's perhaps some eye teaming problems going on. The headache that they get in the car, sometimes headaches can be blamed on dehydration when it's an end of day headache from stress in the classroom. So you've got those obvious things. Then you kind of get into more your performance related kind of symptoms. So if they're losing their place while reading, especially if you notice that they start the first paragraph okay, but then start to fatigue fairly quickly, I mean, that's a fairly good sign that there may well be a vision problem. But we have a sort of a broad caveat, and you kind of go, well, look, vision is your master sense. If you've got any concerns about your child's progress, whether they be in the bottom third of the class or just not working to the potential that you can see there, and they've got these kind of parallel things where they seem to be able to, intelligent kids be able to talk about this sort of stuff, but can't put it down in writing and have trouble doing this sort of schoolwork. So any concerns over progress with learning really, for me, is a big marker that you need to make sure that your top two major senses are checked out, and that's vision being number one and number two being hearing.
And is there any particular age where you see these problems start to show up more often?
Yeah, look, and if you put it into a couple of different categories, we've got we loosely talk about the first couple of years at school being the learning how to read portion, and then you move into sort of late grade two, grade three, grade four in using reading for learning. And so you're getting into kids with more the maybe issues with vision and auditory processing in those younger years. Maybe they don't quite have their ocular motor development quite being where it needs to be based on their age, so they're not quite ready for certain things. And so younger kids will do a bit of a perceptual workup to kind of, they're good predictors to kind of flag, hey, be watchful that your child might find certain things a struggle. Once we get into, like I said, late grade two, grade three, there's a lot more emphasis on a greater volume of print, trying to work out and what the author's trying to say. So there's a lot more comprehension and cognitive skills going on. And the print size jumps smaller. So there's no developmental sort of change to how print size changes. It goes from being fairly big, remove the pictures, make them pretty small. So there's a lot more demand there. And so we'll pick up kids maybe grade one where we can see that there's a little bit of a binocular dysfunction brewing away, but they currently don't have symptoms. And then they return to us in maybe a year or two time, and now they're getting the symptoms because the demand has shifted.
Is there an age where it becomes too late to intervene? I mean, there might be some parents watching this thinking, well, I've got like a 15 or a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old and thinking, well, we've missed the boat. So what would you say to them?
We often say to parents, look, if we find a vision problem that we are fairly confident is currently interfering or did interfere with optimal learning, then there is an avenue still to treat and manage the vision problem, but that doesn't necessarily give the child the love of learning back. So there does need to be some motivation to kind of continue on and get some tutoring and do some catch-up sort of work. So that's a challenging age group where, yes, look, we can still manage the vision problem. And I'll often have adults where we're testing them, and I can say, oh, have you found reading a bit of a challenge or not concentrating well? And I go, well, how did you know? It's like, well, I'm seeing this binocular vision problem that I know often starts in primary school, and the outcome is that it makes reading uncomfortable, so people avoid it. And so this is this cascading thing. So, these are vision problems that can persist into adulthood.
So it's like if somebody, avoids playing sport because of whatever reason, they're not going to suddenly develop a love of sport necessarily at 15 or 16. So it's kind of like ingrained behavior that requires a little bit more effort to turn around.
Exactly, and that's the thing that the sort of overcoming the previous sort of barriers and history still requires probably more motivation than they have when they were younger, and we can provide some of the ways of just removing those barriers so that their efforts, I call it a comorbid sort of situation. You've got this almost double deficit. I've got a learning problem and I've got a vision problem on top. We remove the vision problem. We've still got a learning problem. That doesn't mean that the vision problem is unimportant to remove. It's very important because the very group who has to put in more work and more effort is that the group that's having trouble learning. And so they deserve to have their vision problems removed and managed as much, if not more, than other people.